that were from the last century that can move goods around, and so that actually, and it's easier to develop a landing pad for an airship than it is to develop a runway, right? So that's exciting stuff, and I'm hoping that we're going to hear more about that. The other is the ongoing damage to local environments and concern for how the wildlife will survive. I'm hearing from Bishop Andrew Atatagalak, who's the diocesan bishop for the Arctic. I had to practice a long time to get his last name right, I have to tell you that. He's hearing from elders about how the animals are already changing the way they're moving across the Arctic in terms of the muskox and the caribou. I'm hearing that from folks, elders in the northern parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario as well. The things are changing, you know, and they're trying to figure out where the animals are going. Because in many cases, they put their communities near where the old traditional routes were, right? And so they're now migratory routes, and so now they're going, what are we going to do? And the polar bears. I mean, what's happening with the polar bears is a decrease in sea ice means that they're not getting, they eat in the wintertime. That's when polar bears eat. They don't eat anything from the time the sea ice breaks up until it forms again. See, because they go out and they get seals and walruses and whatever, because they're predators. But the problem is, if you don't have sea ice, they're having to swim further and further, and they're not getting fattened up during the winter time, so that during the summertime hiatus, when they're trying to take care of their young and everything, especially the females, they're actually starving to death. So that's the impact of the loss of sea ice is on these. And what's happening is that they're then moving inland and threatening communities and stuff. And so we're ending up hearing more stories about polar bears getting shot because they're coming in, and you can't have polar, because they're trying to get the dogs, right? Or the little children. So, yeah, see, they might look cute and cuddly, but they ain't. Don't go anywhere near them. They're nasty. They're bears, So this is a concern, and the concern is for the other wildlife and stuff. And they're already seeing insects coming up north that they've never seen before, because insects are, they're one of the first that adapt to the change. So there are things that are happening, and they're going, So they're not sure what's going to happen, and there are no plans put in place with how to deal with the impacts of this. Everybody's just wanting to talk about the good news but it's also going to affect the culture as well, big time. So I said that we're part of Vision 2019, which is the National Church adopted this in a General Synod in 2010. We are one of the priorities for Vision 2019, which is to support ministry through the Council of the North. What that has meant is that it has enabled us to do some extra fundraising, and has raised up the profile of the Council of the North on the National Church website and stuff. So I just wanted to put that up there so you could see that we're all included. Archbishop Robert McCrae was the first primate of the Anglican Church. It was the Church of England in Canada, as it was called back then. And in 1893, they had their first General Synod. The first General Synod was held in Toronto. And Archbishop McCrae said, "Surely all this mission field will have its needs much more clearly recognized and more adequately met if the whole Church has them kept before it and is made to feel its responsibility." He was talking about the North and the West, so more the North. And what he was talking about was the fact that some of the church in southern Canada and eastern Canada was already saying, why do we have to support the work that's happening further west and further north? Why is that important? And Archbishop McCrae, who came out of Winnipeg, said this is important, and he was one of the driving forces behind forming a General Synod. And so it's his, and that he made sure that the care of the North and the West was kept in the preamble for the General Synod. So that picture down at the bottom is an archival picture from Split Lake in northern Manitoba, which in its Cree name, because this is one I do know, is called Petaskwiak, Cree Nation. And that was the mission field, the mission and the trading post on the Nelson River. So I know people always ask me this question, so I put it up here. How are we supported? Well, first of all, supported just like this parish is by the folks that give every Sunday and put their money on the plate and help support their parishes. We're next supported by the budget of the Anglican Church of Canada. And this is the point where I need to say thank you, miigwech, to all of you, because you put money on the plate on Sunday morning. Most of that stays here. Portion of it goes off to your diocesan offices and supports the work of your diocese and your bishop and all of that. A portion of the diocesan budget then goes to General Synod. 25% of what goes to General Synod then comes and supports the work of the Council of the North. So, my brothers and sisters, when I say a ministry of the whole church by the whole church, I'm darn serious. Because it would not happen without the support of all of the dioceses across Canada. Then we're supported by generous donations from individuals and groups through Anglican Appeal and directly to the Anglican Church of Canada. And I'll say a bit more about that in the next slide. We have a regular appeal that we work with Anglican Appeal to develop called Council of the North Month in September. We've developed a whole bunch of different resources for that, and I'm quite thankful to say that there have been more and more churches across the country that are responding to that, because it's a simple way to kind of share the story. So we have a bunch of resources to help. One of the things we do encourage people to have is a community feast. In September, like we do Harvest Thanksgiving, there are hunters festivals all across the north. Remember I said that thing about hunting? Because people go out and do hunting and bring in food, and then they usually have a big traditional stew, usually moose or caribou or venison, and bannock. And so we're encouraging people to have a community feast where you have stew that's traditional to your area. I've even told folks if they need to have a vegetarian stew, go ahead and do that. And have bannock with it, and these are nice little placemats. This is a laminated one, but it has a nice little things on the back. So you can tell about the Council of the North and help to raise a little bit of money for the Council of the North. We had one parish in New Brunswick who said, we can't do that, but we'll do a spring tea. So they had a spring tea and they raised like $800, a little rural parish, and I thought, do it, that's fine. I don't mind. So, anyways, we'll go to the next slide. So these are just some of the resources. We have an activity calendar. And we just ask people to have fun, get involved. That Inukshuk was made actually in my own parish, where we built it one Sunday and people put prayers in for the North and what they were concerned about, and it stayed up for the whole month and was part of the worship area. Just kind of kept it involved. So we're on the web. Those of you who need to find out more, we're on the Anglican Church of Canada website. It's real easy, anglican.ca/CN. It's like Council of North, right? We also have a Facebook page, so if you're on Facebook, come and find us. Find me, because I run that. That's part of my job. And I put up regular news about what I'm doing and where I am, and what concerns. I've been putting up a lot of stuff from Shannon's Dream, and which is about First Nations education, and from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and stuff like that, just because those are concerns within the Council of the North. So, here's my chance to mangle some Aboriginal words. Some of them I can do. So, Ekose, Nakrenak, miigwech, thank you. Kujanimik, merci, matna, from all of the Council of the North to the rest of the Anglican Church of Canada. Thank you. So, questions? Responses?
How much is your total budget, and how much does the Anglican Appeal help you? And then this diocese has agreed to raise $750,000 over the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Yes, it sounds like a huge amount to them, because every parish I go into says, wow, and they all agree you need the money. Mm-hmm. But what will that do? I know I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
What could you give me a picture of? Because I'm going to so many parishes, and I can see the desperation.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what I can tell you, because one of the things that's going to be happening at the April meeting of the Council of the North Bishops is they are going to be talking about this, because they know they got to figure out what they're going to do. But one of the things they have been saying is it will be working with real people doing real ministry. So it may not pay, like, I mean, you think $750,000 sounds like a lot, but a number of our dioceses, I was telling Karen beforehand that my own diocese has 45 parishes and only 5 of them can afford to pay their clergy. So we've got 90% of our clergy plus who are not getting paid for the work that they're doing. Lydia Mamikwa didn't get a stipend until she became bishop. So because we rejigged our council of our funding from General Synod so as to make that happen. So it's not going to pay people. There's just $750,000 could get spent in a year doing that. I think what they're moving towards is thinking about, because they're really, a number of the bishops, Michael Hawkins from Saskatchewan is really working with a number of communities who want to have clergy and want to pay their clergy, want to have paid clergy, and he says, you work to get funding in place, like make their money in the bank. I will make sure that there's other money to help, but we're not doing it 100% from outside. It has to come from within the community. So I think there are going to be places like that. LaRange is one of them, that are going to say, okay, we've got, $100,000 so we can pay somebody for 2 years, and then there will be an application to the fund, something, and there will be more money that will go in to assist with that, right? So it won't be, we will not solve the non-stipendiary ministry fund from the money that's coming from Ottawa, with the money that's coming from Ottawa. Yeah, I know you know that. And we won't solve it with the money that's also coming from Toronto, because Toronto's got a similar case, right? It won't get solved. What it will do is encourage people to think about how they can be good stewards of their own resources and support their clergy themselves. So there's all this other stuff going on. And it will also help with training, right? If we can't pay people, we can at least pay for to have them trained and to have them come into the areas where they can come and give them the resources to develop a suicide prevention program within their own community. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's going to help with that kind of stuff so that we can build up healthier communities and congregations, because you can't just talk about in the communities where I'm talk about raising up healthy congregations. You can't have a healthy congregation if your community is so disabled and dysfunctional. You have to talk about doing community development work. So you know what I'm like? It's a broader picture than just supporting a clergy person. Yes.
There's no connection with the Primates World Relief Fund?
The Primates World Relief Fund has an Indigenous Canada section, and they do projects that are come up from communities with those communities. We support them, and we're not in competition. As and my Primates Fund friends would tell you the same thing. We're not in competition. Because they support a lot of the work that I and others do as well. But we often have communities who say, we've got this project we'd like to do, and so we'll direct them to the Primates Fund to get funding for that, and a specific project usually around healing and reconciliation. We also work with the Indigenous Healing Fund, which is run by the National Church, and we encourage communities to use that fund as well for specific reconciliation and healing projects as well. So, because you have to get the support of the bishop to ask for that money, right? So.
Is there interaction with other churches?
Now, this is the interesting history about the mission history of the North. You all know about the fur trade, right? The Northwest Company was Catholic, which came out of Montreal. The Hudson's Bay Company was Anglican. Right, so you can follow the mission history of both of those churches by following the fur trade routes. And if you go from Churchill in northern Manitoba or from Moose Factory in northern Ontario, and you follow the rivers, and so I'll do the one for Churchill, because that's the one I know best. If you follow Churchill, because that's in my diocese, you follow Churchill, you go down the Nelson River, and eventually you get to the top of Lake Winnipeg. And then you come down Lake Winnipeg, and then you come out through I'm going backwards where the water runs the other way, right? But we started up in North Churchill. The oldest parish in the Diocese of Keewatin is in Churchill, not Kenora. So you go down, and then you follow the Winnipeg River. The Winnipeg River then has its start in Lake of the Woods. Where is Lake of the Woods? Kenora. And then you follow that, and you go down along the bottom, and the Rainy River flows into the Lake of the Woods. That's right along the border with the United States, and the Rainy River comes out of Rainy Lake, and you've got my diocese. That's how, and it came from the north to the south, and then went up into the Ojibwe communities in northern Ontario. Same way with the Northwest Company. So what you end up having across the north, it was like the Anglican and Roman Catholic Church bishops had a gentleman's agreement. If you're in that community, we won't send anybody, except where they were non-Indigenous. So the Indigenous communities go back and forth. Some are Catholic, some are Roman Catholic, some are Anglican. And they go back and forth like that. So lots of our communities, in fact the majority of them, are 100% Anglican. There is nobody else there. If you're born in Kingfisher Lake, which is in northern Ontario, which is Lydia's home community, you are Anglican. You will come and get baptized at the Anglican Church. You will get confirmed there. You are Anglican. So more of the cooperation that happens is with the bishops, because they talk to each other, right? But there's not a lot of, and we don't have a lot of the Lutherans, the United Church, the Presbyterians, they didn't come north. Because the old Methodists and folks, they all went where their settlers went, right? So they didn't come north. It's only the Anglicans and the Roman Catholics that went north, or started north and then came south. Or got established where settlers were going. But there are Anglicans in northern Manitoba whose families have been Anglican for 7 generations. A long time. They are incredibly rooted within the Anglican Church. And it's my church. I've had, and there are families, within our own parishes who couldn't, just because of changing circumstances, wouldn't have that history. But so that's why there's not a lot of, it's not for lack, it's just because they're not there. The communities are, yeah. Until you get to the larger communities like Yellowknife or Iqaluit or Thompson or places like that. But not until then. Anybody else?
What's the effect of, we hear a lot about diamond mining in the north, and is that supplying employment in those areas?
And stuff. To mitigate some of the environmental damage that's going on there. You know how they've been talking about the housing shortage there, and there's like 90 families, and you know that you've seen pictures of those trailers. Those are from De Beers. Well, do you know why they got flooded out with the sewage? Because De Beers flooded the sewage system. So, and I've heard Chief Spence, I can't remember her first name right now, I've heard her say that, yeah, we've got De Beers up here, but if we don't have our we don't have our new school yet, that's just going to be starting this, they're going to just build that this summer. It's been 5 years that they've been promised their school. They're just going to get it this summer. And she also said, and our kids aren't educated as well as the kids in the South are, so that when they go to university or college, they actually have to take a remedial 1 or 2 years to be able to get up to the educational level of the kids who are coming out of provincially funded public schools. I mean, I actually think the federal government should say to the provinces, we're going to give up funding on First Nation schools, we're going to just transfer the money to you and you can run them with the partnership with the First Nations, because I think it would, the way it's happening right now, they don't really care. I'm going to be blunt here, I don't actually think the federal government really cares about First Nations education or health. because there are constant battles between, I'll just use Ontario because we all live in Ontario, between OHIP and the federal government in terms of funding for healthcare. So when people are flown out and medevaced out to a southern hospital for medical care, the folks at the local hospitals and stuff have to fight with the federal government to get reimbursed. It's bizarre. Like there's so much about the system that just kind of makes everybody cranky, and I get people asking me, so what can we do? What can we do? And anyway, so that the mining will have benefits and not. And so that's why all the folks are saying we need to be at the table, and that's why Big Trout Lake, which I talked about earlier, has had big arguments with a palladium mining company that wants to come in and mine palladium there because they want to do it on the territory, but they haven't come and talked to the community first about what they want to do. So there's going to be benefits, but there's also, there's all this stuff we're still doing catch up from the residential schools because we've got families who don't know how to, like parents who don't know how to be families, and so we've got, and I don't know if you've been listening about the oxycodone, I could go on and on, right? But the oxycodone issue that is happening, we've got Grand Chief Stan Beardy from Northern Ontario he's been very public in talking about this. He's got some communities in Treaty 9 where 50% of the adult population is addicted to oxycodone, and then they're going to change it and not make it available, and we're going to have whole communities where people are then going to get addicted to heroin, and because the drug dealers will bring it in. So we've got a mental health drug issue, addiction issue happening, and why are people medicating themselves? Miserable. Depression, more than just depression. We're talking about no sense of future. Okay, so this gets into the church, where the church is in the midst of this, right? So the church is in the midst of this, and there are pastoral care people working their butts off and doing the best they can and trying to bring people joy and a sense of new life, but there are so many issues. I know clergy who are just going, we're just tired, and they're not getting paid for what they're doing. No, you go ahead, interrupt me, I'm ranting.
No, it's really on that issue because I'm working with the gift campaign.
Yes? Yes?
Trying to get through the media, what's truth, what's not, what's the actual relationship between the church and Aboriginals, and how many are Christians, practicing Christians?
Yeah, okay. Here's the thing. As I said about those communities it's really hard to get weekly statistics out of parishes about how many are attending, because I don't know. There's just some issues about keeping those kinds of records. So there are discussions going on in some of the communities about how to. Do you know, I'm struggling because we don't have any figures, okay? I would say that if you walked into a community and asked them if they believed in God and if they were members of the Anglican Church, there would be a lot that would say, a majority of the people in the community, in the different communities would say yes. There are some who are working towards trying to bring back traditional native spirituality and integrate that within the church. The issue is that in some of our northern communities, the elders are going, we got told by our grandparents, who got told by their grandparents, who got told by the missionaries that all that stuff was of the devil. So we put it all away. And they did. They put it all away. In some communities, they got told that having a second wife was not part of being a Christian, so they left the second wife and their children and moved on without them. They sacrificed a whole lot to become Christian. A lot. And so now they're saying, but now the church is telling us that we can do this stuff. What are we supposed to believe? So there's a whole crisis within the communities about how to, because we can't all just go in there and say, oh, you should just, you should bring back, smudging because it's like incense, and you should bring back, this, drumming because, drums are okay in church. We got told it wasn't. So there's a whole lot of education, that needs to happen, a whole lot of calmness about it. Lydia has started doing some stuff. One of the things that she had done was that on her crozier, the women in the community did a beadwork that goes around the top of her crozier in the different First Nations colors, in the colors of the, so she's making, and putting feathers on it. That was a small sign, right? She was saying, we can, but she has to work carefully, because if she doesn't, she's not going to get the support of her elders in the communities, right? So it's a very gentle process that needs to happen.
There's still a lot of anger.
There's a ton of anger. There's a ton of anger, especially from younger folks. Ton of anger about residential schools and the damage that got made to their families. And then on top of that, this is the crunch. And then on top of that, in the 70s and the 80s, in a number of our dioceses, we had pedophile priests. So we got a lot of angry folk. A lot of angry folk. And I mean, I'll tell you, in my own diocese, I don't want to name this pedophile person because I don't want to honor him that way. When some of the young men in Northern Ontario brought charges up against him and he went to court the first time, the other clergy from that region sat with him and not with their sons. Because they didn't believe their sons. So it was a lot of damage. A lot of damage. And it's taken Archbishop David and Lydia and other leaders in Northern Manitoba as well a long time. And it will continue, because that's generational damage, right? And that's the same with the residential schools. But as my Archbishop would say, and others would say in the Council of the North, we're there for the long haul. The Anglican Church has been here. And then there's some good news. So Larry Beardy, who's an archdeacon from Northern Manitoba, loves to tell this story. He said, residential schools took away my language.